The holidays are right around the corner, so it's time for some handmade holiday gift ideas. This year I wanted to challenge myself to create projects that are only made using wood, meaning no hardware, so you guys don't have to wait on shipping times to create any of these things. So all you're gonna need is wood and glue and I guess the tools to make them, but I also didn't want to go out and buy more wood, so I'm just going to try to use whatever I have on hand. First up, we have this knife block. I was looking for any piece that was at least 8 inches wide and found this ambrosia maple that has a live edge on it, which I thought would be a cool feature, and cut up 2 pieces to rough length, which is about 10 inches. I don't want to get rid of that live edge, so I used my jointer jig at the table saw to cut it to width with the live edge facing towards the fence. Then used a stop block at the crosscut sled to cut both pieces to length. This whole design is so simple, and I made it even simpler for you if you want to make it with a downloadable drilling template you can get on my website using the link down below. All you need to do is apply it with spray adhesive to the ends of the workpieces and drill out the holes. I drilled out all the holes on both pieces at the same time by sticking them together with double-sided tape. This will make sure the holes match up perfectly. On the drilling template, there's a center line you can use as a guide for where to cut the holes in half, creating a semicircle that a dowel will fall into. This is easily done at the crosscut sled with both pieces still attached to each other. Then you can separate them to attach the dowels. Speaking of dowels, you can buy 1/2-inch dowels for this, but remember I'm using what I got for these projects and don't have any, so I'll have to make some from this scrap walnut. I've shown this process a ton in my other videos, but basically you mill up square stock to your desired dowel dimension, then use a round-over bit that has the same radius as the dowel you want on all 4 sides, creating perfectly round dowels. Cool. Using a stop block again, the dowels get cut up into 4-inch long pieces. I will definitely have all the dimensions and all the info you need on my website if you want to make this or any of the other projects in this video. If I was using square stock, I could just glue it up now, but I have the live edge to deal with. Only one piece had this really cool live edge on it, so I had to fake it on the other piece. This was really fun and easy to do with the new Wood River Spokeshave. If you've never used a Spokeshave, I highly recommend picking one up. I love using them, and I'll link to this one from WOODCRAFT down below. Anyway, after a bunch of sanding, it's time for a glue up. The most important 2 dowels here are the front and back, so I made sure to take my time and place these 2 perfectly before moving on to the other dowels. I chose to use brads to hold the dowels in place, but you could probably get away with just clamping or maybe reinforcing with an 1/8-inch brass pin or something like that. That would be pretty cool. Whatever. This worked fine since I was able to fill the holes with wood putty after. You can also choose not to cut the holes in half and just insert the dowels in regular holes. That would look cool also. Always lots of options. You just want to make sure to clean up all the glue squeeze out from the inside because you won't be able to reach in there after the glue dries. The outside gets cleaned up afterwards and it's ready for finish. I think this thing looks so cool. When I designed this, I wasn't thinking about using a live edge at all, but as soon as I saw this piece, I knew it was perfect for this application, and I think it makes it look so interesting. I love this thing, and there's so many different ways that you can make it. I think it would be really cool to personalize it and put a logo or initials or something on the side here. Just super fun and easy to make. So moving on to the next project, not really sure what to call it, but this is a serving board that has a built-in cracker tray. I knew I wanted the tray to be at least 9 inches wide, so I found a piece of maple that I could resaw to get that width and glued it up. That's going to be the main part of the tray. Moving on to the cracker, well, holder, not really sure what to call it, part of the tray. I knew I wanted this part to be about 6 inches long and about 1 3/4 inches tall. So I ripped up some walnut to create that height at the table saw and then cut it to roughly that length at the miter saw. And looking at my stop block moving here, I mean really roughly. To create the cracker well on all the pieces, I'll use a template that's made with a ginormous 2.5-inch Forstner bit. I know not everyone has one of those. You can rough cut a semicircle with a jigsaw and fine tune it with sanding just as well. The template goes on the pieces with double-sided tape. Then the semicircle gets rough cut on the bandsaw and then cleaned up with a flush trim bit. And if you don't like routers or don't have one, sanding works too. It just takes longer. A flush trim bit works best when you're removing as little material as possible. So when rough cutting, I leave maybe about a 1/16 of material left over, and those little semicircles could be sanded and used for something else. I'm not including them as one of the projects of this video, but cut a slot in them and they become a place card holder or picture holders. Just don't toss them. They can totally be used. Back to this project, time for glue up. The hardest thing here is making sure these will all line up, and I totally could have done a better job at that. Maybe I should have added salt to the glue or brads where I knew I was going to be cutting away later. Definitely lessons learned here. After the glue dried, the main part of the tray is easy to clean up at the planer, and then it's cut to final length at the crosscut slide. The cracker well was a bit more difficult since it's shorter than my planer allows for, so I had to trick my planer into thinking it was longer than it actually was by temporarily attaching two guide rails along the edges with the good old tape and CA glue method. Now that it's flat on both sides, it can be cut to length at the crosscut slide, and then I had to clean up the curved cut. The spindle sander didn't reach halfway, so it gave me a starting point on either end, but the middle still needed a ton of work. There was lots of hand sanding, and this gooseneck card scraper really came in handy. To attach the two parts of the serving tray together, I'm going to use a tongue and groove, which is super easy to do with a bit set at the router table. The main part of the tray gets the tongue that's placed in the center on one end of the board, and then I can set the matching bit for the groove to the correct height using the actual tongue that was just cut and cut the groove on one end of the cracker well. Super satisfying fit. Now, I think it's too bulky like this, so I'll draw an angle that starts from the height of the main part of the tray. And I don't know what that angle is at all, so I'll just set an angle gauge along that line and use that to set the angle on the table saw blade. I cut that angle on both ends, and now it looks so much cooler and it's ready for glue up. Once dry, I trimmed off the edges just to flush everything up, and it's time for finish. This joint came out so good. That transition is seamless. I know this project is a little odd, but we serve stuff like this often, and we usually just have crackers on a separate plate. I feel like I'm going to use this one a lot. Yeah, this one's not a gift. I'm keeping this one. I have so many things to say about this board. First of all, it would be really cool if there were magnets in here that were holding these together, but remember, I'm trying to only use wood to make these projects, but that's definitely a really cool idea. Also, I decided to glue these two pieces together, but I also think it would be really cool if you made a sliding dovetail so you can separate the two pieces. Just another option there. And also, I said that I am not going to use hardware, but I think this thing really needs feet. You can make some feet with wood, but I think I'll probably end up using those rubber cutting board feet, which I have lying around here somewhere. So before moving on to the next project, which is this geometric serving tray, I have something really cool to announce. If you build your own handmade holiday gift, there's a chance that you can win a $100 gift card to Ariat. Ariat makes high quality workwear that's comfortable and made to last. Everything that I've been wearing in this video and most of my other videos is from Ariat Work, and I highly recommend checking out their work line, especially if you work in cold weather like me. And if you've been thinking about trying something out from them, now is the time. Well, actually, next week, November 24th till November 30th, Ariat is having their Black Friday sale. And this is their best sale of the year where you can save big on select boots and apparel. And don't forget about their Cyber Monday sale, which will be on November 29th. Now, back to that $100 gift card that I mentioned. Ariat is going to give 2 lucky viewers of mine a $100 gift card to their store, and I get to choose who wins. So I want you guys to make your own handmade holiday gifts this year, and me and my kids will decide who made the coolest projects. So all you have to do is build something out of wood and post it to Instagram with the hashtag Ariat 3x3 handmade holiday by December 10th, and you'll be entered to win. That's it. It's so cool of Ariat to do something like this, and I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. And definitely check out the link below so you can check out all the Ariat Black Friday deals. All right, back to the projects. Next up is this geometric puzzle serving tray. So this one is a bit more involved, but worth it, I think. This tray is 13 inches round, and it's going to be made of 3 different species of wood that are stacked and layered together instead of carved out of one thicker piece of material. The bottom of the main tray is going to be made of walnut that I resawed to get the width I needed for a 13-inch circle and glued it up into a panel. The next layer will be made from these cutoffs of a maple butcher block that a neighbor gave to me. Thank you, neighbor. This butcher block is going to be the material for the top of the main circle tray, and it's also going to be the bottom of these smaller geometric trays. First, I'll work on the top ring of the main circle tray. Since this wood is from butcher block, it has these finger joints between the pieces, so I just cut them at all those seams at the miter saw. Then using the Block Layer website, I figured out the dimensions I need the pieces to be for a 13-inch circle that will be 1/2 inch thick. The Block Layer website tells you what angle to cut the pieces, but my miter gauge also has a guide on it, which I think is pretty cool. I cut the angle on one end, and then using a stop block, flipped the piece over and cut the other end. It was just a matter of doing test cuts on scrap to get the stop block at the correct location, and now I have 8 pieces ready for glue up. To glue this up, I'm going super simple here. I am only going to use tape to hold the pieces together. I just made sure to pull the tape really hard before placing it down so that it pulls the pieces in tight to each other once it's laid out. Seemed to work out okay, but a hose clamp or a ratchet strap or something probably would have been better. All right, now time to make this octagon round. I'll use a circle jig. So I brought in a scrap of the same height to use as my center pivot point, then made sure that the center point was equally spaced around the octagon and tacked it in place with brads where I know it will be cut away later. Right now, I'm just focusing on making the inside of this part round. I don't care about the outside just yet. This is going to be glued to the base, so I use sandpaper on a flat surface to even up all the pieces. Now onto the base that it will be glued to. I cleaned it up at the planer, then used my 6-in-1 trim router jig as a circle jig again to make the 13-inch circle and prepped it for the glue up. I marked a circle 1/2 inch from the inside of the maple top piece to use as a guide for placing it on the bottom walnut piece. I added some glue and clamped it up. The glue squeeze out on the inside would be impossible to remove later, so it's best to remove it now, and I like to use a wet toothbrush to do this. While that sets up, I can work on the geometric inserts for the tray. Once again, I made it really simple for you guys with a downloadable template you can get on my website. There are a few ways you can go about doing this. The simplest would be to just tack the template on the pieces you want to use, rough cut them out, and shape them until you get to the lines on the paper template. Easy. But I prefer to make hard templates from 1/4 inch MDF from the paper templates so that it's more exact, and I will have them lying around if I ever want to make them again. I also find it's easier to refine a shape on 1/4 inch MDF than hardwood, but that's just me and the way that I like to work. I took this scrap butcher block from earlier and resawed it at the bandsaw to get enough material for the base part of these little trays. All I need from these templates is the outside dimensions. So I traced them out with a pencil, rough cut them at the bandsaw, then brought them to their final shape using the hard template double side tape to them and a flush trim bit at the router table. Easier than sanding all those hard maple pieces, in my opinion at least. Now moving on to the parts that will make the top lip of the little trays. This piece of canary wood might not look like scrap, but it is. Well, actually it's being repurposed, and it also has finish on it, so I'll have to sand all the finish away before moving on. Using the templates again, I traced out the parts. This time it's important to mark both the outside and the inside from the template, and I could rough cut all those inner pieces out. This was not fun at all to do with a jigsaw. I feel like a scroll saw would be the perfect tool for this. Probably for this whole project, actually. Since I wasn't able to get close enough to my line with the jigsaw for it to be safe to use with a flush trim bit, I had to use a guide bushing. This way, I could control the depth of the bit and take off really small amounts until I'm left with a small material that's left over from the thickness of the guide bushing, and I could easily clean that up with a flush trim bit as the final step. Now, I forgot to press record on my camera, but I rough cut the shapes at the bandsaw and they're ready to be glued onto the maple bases I made earlier. Since the canary wood lips are cut a bit oversized, I just made sure an even amount was hanging off the maple as I clamped it up, and I used all my clamps for this. While that's setting up, I can finish the main round tray. I cut the outer ring at the bandsaw, then used a flush trim bit to make it all nice and flush, and once the glue dried on the trays, I did the same to those. Since the top lips on both the main tray and the little trays are about 1/2 inch thick, I thought it would be cool to use a 1/4 inch round over bit so the whole tops are curved and rounded over, and it's pretty cool looking, I think. Then I just had to do a whole bunch of sanding. Those inner curves were no fun, but finishing is fun and made the whole process worth it. Since these will come into contact with food, I used walnut oil, and I love the way the sapwood book match looks on that main tray. Okay, how fun is this? You can serve it just like this, or remove some of the trays and add chips, or all the trays and add even more chips. It's definitely a conversation piece that's really fun and functional. I love it. How fun is this? So I thought that I was making it easier by doing the whole lamination process, but I think that actually made it a little bit more difficult. If I were to make this again, and I can because I already have the templates, I would start off with thicker material to begin with, and I would hog out the middle with a bowl carving bit or a dish carving bit or something like that. So what I would do, start off with thicker pieces and then hog out the inside at the drill press, and then use the bowl carving bit on the inside of the template like that, and then rough cut the outside and then flush trim the outside. And I think that that would be a lot easier. But if you are a scroller and you have a scroll saw, doing the lamination is definitely the way to go. You would just need to print out 2 of the printable templates, one for the top and one for the bottom. Oh, also make sure to mark which way is up. So on these templates I wrote top because I was getting just a little bit confused there. All right, moving on, we have this baguette tray. For this I need a piece that's at least 16 inches long and thick enough for me to carve into. I found this piece of red oak cut to rough length and marked a rough curve on the end with a center line that I can use as a guide for drilling holes at the drill press. I set the depth stop so the bottom of the bit hits the bottom of the curve that I drew out. These holes will act as a guide as I'm carving, telling me to keep going or to stop. Carving with an angle grinder is a crazy messy process, so I take this task outside and just go to town until I see all the holes I drilled have disappeared. I removed most of the material with this rough disc and then swapped out to a finer disc, and I was able to get pretty close to my rough mark on the end there. Then it was all just about time and handwork. A gooseneck scraper helped with removing the rough angle grinder cuts, and then a ton of sanding was involved as well. Time to make the slots. I want the cleanest cut possible here, so I used a flat top grind blade, and I want each slot to be 1/2 inch apart, so I just drew a line directly on the sled. I set the blade so it was slightly higher than the curve that I carved out, placed it so the curve was facing down, and cut all the slots by placing the previous cut on the pencil line that I drew out. I considered making a key or something that the cut can fall into so these would be exact, but it's not joinery. It doesn't need to be so perfect. Lining it up on the line was more than good enough. Oh, and I'll link to this flat top grind blade from WOODCRAFT down below. It's such an awesome blade for stuff like this. And once again, it felt too bulky to me, so I set the blade to 45 degrees and cut off the bottom corners to lighten it up. Super cool. It was a little annoying to sand the edges of all those cuts, but totally doable. And it's time for finish. This time, since red oak is not particularly nice when you just oil it, I thought it would be cool to stain it black. This is butcher block oil that has stain in it, and it fully cures in 72 hours, and it's food safe after that. It was also a little annoying to get into all those cuts with the stain, but I think it was worth it. This looks so cool stained black, cooler than oiled red oak in my opinion. Now, I don't know if many people need a baguette cutting tray, but it's definitely a fun little thing to have, and it only took me about 2 hours to make it. And if you're not using it for cutting baguettes, you can use it to hold fruit. So it's multifunctional and I love it. This is totally not how I pictured this when I first started, but I think it's really cool and it kind of just evolved as the project was going on. So there's other options for making this. I think it would be really cool to make this out of a log or out of firewood. Or if you're someone who likes to cut your baguettes on a bias, you can make these slots angled like that, and I think that that is really cool also. The black looks really cool to me. All right, moving on. Last but not least, we have these bandsaw scoops. For these, I'm going to need smaller pieces of scrap. I found this dowel, which I thought would be cool since it's already round, but square stock works too. I originally saw this idea from a guy on YouTube named Patrick's Woodshop, and he made the video like 7 years ago, and I've been wanting to make them ever since. I'll definitely add a link to his video, but all you have to do is cut out a curved scoop shape from your scrap. That inside cut will become the handle, and the outside cut is the scoop. So the inside is the outside, and the outside is the inside. The inside just gets moved over to the side and glued into place. A couple of mistakes that I made here. I should have cut the outer curve on the scoop before gluing it up, and I should have added another clamp, adding downward pressure from the handle onto the scoop. See, the outside curve would have been easier to cut before I glued it up. Still doable, but I had to raise the guide bearings too high. Anyway, crisis averted, and now you just have to cut away the shape of the handle. First cut the two sides, then cut away at the bottom. Now the rest is just fine-tuning it with some sanding. The belt sander was great for getting into those curves, and I wanted the handle to have more of a hand-carved feel, so I chose to trim it with a carving knife because it's fun to do and I like to see the tool marks. I also thought the center portion was a little blocky and it just needed something, so I used a gouge to make a little indent for your thumb when you're holding the scoop, and it's time for finish. So this is a fun little project, and I think it's an excellent use of scraps. You could use it for scooping coffee, flour, sugar, dog food, whatever you need scooping. And I just love the look of like the handmade handle, like seeing the knife marks on there. I think that's cool. So you might be wondering what happened to the walnut one. Not really sure, but the glue just didn't set up properly on it, and there's a crack running through there. I also tried to make another one out of maple, and mistakes were made. I just cut a little bit too deep at the bandsaw. So this looks like it's a simple project, but it's a fun challenge for sure. So that's 5 wooden handmade gifts that you can make this holiday season. Wait, actually, 6 handmade wooden projects that you can make this holiday season. So don't forget to enter to win the $100 gift card from Ariat. Use the hashtag Ariat 3x3 Handmade Holiday by December 10th on Instagram, and you'll be entered to win. I cannot wait to see what you guys come up with. So huge thanks to Ariat for putting that all together, and a huge thanks to WOODCRAFT for sponsoring this video as well. Just a quick note before I go, speaking of gift cards, I still have a special offer with Fetch Rewards where you will get 3,000 extra bonus points when you use the code 3x3 Custom. With Fetch Rewards, all you need to do is scan your receipts to earn points, which you can redeem for gift cards. Download the app using the link down below and start snapping and saving today. All right, thanks so much for watching. Happy holidays, and I'll see you on the next one.
There's too much cheese for one cracker.
Yeah, I know. I was in a hurry to cut it. So I cut it really big. What do you guys think?
It's perfect.
Just keep